effectively, the Galea aponeurosis is what becomes contiguous with the SMAS. But in the temporal area, it bifurcates into the superficial, the temporoparietal fascia and the deep temporal fascia. The most important thing for me in the temporal area is the facial nerve, effectively. And that runs within the bifurcation of that fascia, which Tim just showed you in a diagrammatic fashion. The other important things, the second most important thing is avoiding intravascular placement. So I try and stay superficial with the injection and use a cannula. The cannula helps me with the blunt cannula helps me with prevention of a vascular injury. Staying in that superficial subcutaneous plane helps me stay away from the facial nerve, effectively. So that's my logic behind that. If you're going through the temporal area with a needle, because of the variability of position and structure, position of these sort of vital elements, effectively you sometimes just have to kebab through them. I use that word, kebab through them. It's like a brochette, sort of going through structures and then saying, okay, at least we're on the other side of them. But when you get to the deep part of the temporal fossa, what happens is that you get to a place where in between the fibers of the temporalis muscle, which are tightly adhered to the periosteum, you have the deep temporal artery that runs in that area. So very often you think you might have gone through it and gone out the other side, and what's the big deal if I puncture it with a 27 gauge needle? They'll get some bruising, they'll get some hematoma. But no, actually you can find, when you're on bone, you can aspirate blood. So don't think because you're on periosteum that you're safe from aspirating blood. You might well aspirate arterial blood. It happened to me when someone was showing me this technique and I was using my wife as a volunteer, and straight away, oh, arterial blood from my wife's head. Probably going to move that needle. So maybe that was sort of divine providence, and it told me I should go with the superficial subcutaneous technique. But literally, that's what I'm going to show you now. The other bonus of this technique is that effectively, the problem in the temporal area is very deep. If you put even a high G product that deep and try and lift up several layers of the temporal fossa, you're going to use a lot of product. So that will stop you from doing the procedure, because there's a cost issue to the client. They'll be like, what? So, per temporal fossa, you're going to charge me for 2 vials of filler, 4 vials of filler, £1,600 for a treatment? Maybe not. So that equates to you not doing enough of those procedures, first of all. And the second thing is, you'll get a much better result from using a mid to high G filler in the superficial area for less product. Okay, let's have a look at this in action now. Right, can I just big up this video? So, literally what we're doing here, hold my microphone off, let me just press play, is where, oh, I've gone halfway through the video already. So literally what I do is, oh, sorry about that. I'm talking through it already, so.
I'm now going to use also lidocaine 1% to effectively lift up the epidermis from the
Louder. Just to quickly say, we're using Chlorhex to clean. Always use Chlorhex to prep the skin. Chlorhex is not just bactericidal, it's sporicidal, it has memory. You're putting an implant below the skin. If you're putting an implant remember your principles of surgical asepsis before you do that. It's difficult in this area to be really, really clean because you've got the hair in the way. You can't put some sort of, field drape, but at least choose your antiseptic wisely. And use xylocaine. It's very, very little used, I see, by my colleagues, but it makes it comfortable, but it also helps to hydrodissect that area and create a larger space in the superficial subcutaneous plane, and also close down the superficial temporal artery as well, because you don't want that to bleed a lot, and you don't want to you want to minimize the risk of trauma. So adrenaline is your friend, and the liquid from the local anesthetic is your nice hydrodissector, so use that. So this is just me putting the anesthetic in.
That's going to nicely numb my entrance point, and literally within a moment we're going to put in the injection.
70-year-old lady, so temporal hollowing issue. She'd had a lot of work done in the lower face and mid face, but not so much in the temples. Sorry, let me speed this along a little bit. So here I'm putting a 21 gauge needle in. 21 gauge needle is just my trocar needle to enter the space. Because you've lifted up the skin, it's easy to get into that space now, because you're just pushing it in, and as soon as you get into the sort of local anesthetic filled space, leave the needle in there, make sure you're not getting any bleeding. Completely painless.
Now the procedure itself, the brain will feel a little bit of pushing and pulling, so it shouldn't feel overly uncomfortable. To verify that there's no bleeding from the area. I'll go to the forehead again 1 second. See comfortably now into that.
So just note that gentle scissoring action, just to make sure you can't force too hard in this area, otherwise you'll go between planes.
As you can see, I'm not having to really force the needle at all, sorry, the cannula at all. So I'm going to make a start around, if that's okay, you ready? Now you'll see, because of the relative superficial placement of the filler, you'll see the fill straight away. Now, lots of people have talked about this method and said, okay, yes, it's safe to go in this plane. But if you do go in this plane, there can be issues with venous congestion. I've found that if we use normally a filler of a suitable G-prime, such as Volin, this is less of a problem. We're using very stiff fillers, such as something like Jupiter Reluma, then this could potentially be an issue, but usually what we'll find is that we'll get comfortable. Just fine. Raise the eyebrows for me there again. Lovely. So, literally what I'm going to do is smooth that down. Now, how's that feeling now, Ray?
Right. So I think you can get the point from that sort of demonstration there, how things look. I'm going to just show you a little scouting video here to show you how we have sort of done things
So here we are,
afterwards.
about to proceed to the second side, but you can already, I hope, appreciate after a 2 mil fill with bolus that temple is looking nicely full. We'll just compare with the other side. If you just sort of come towards me.
Now, when you see the front view there, you can see the hollowing on one side.
The hollowness on the
It's a bit
right
difficult
side.
because of my lighting, I think. But I've got to.
Let's go with a 2 mil fill on her right side. As you can see, with the left side already looking quite full.
And just quickly, there's a short third video there, and I'll just finish off by summarizing a few points as well. Okay, so here we go. This is once we've completed the other side.
So here you are now with Lorraine having had the other side filled with the same method. You can see the sites of entry here, just literally that little red pink dot there. So we anesthetized that with the Narcan and then lifted the tissue up and used the same method with the 25 gauge cannula. So immediate post-treatment, that is the immediate post-treatment result of 2 mils of bolus per side using the technique.
So you see, I did use a fair bit of Olif there, but she is actually 70 years old, and she had very hollow temples and quite an overfilled mid-face and lower face. So it created quite a discrepancy that to gain the balance between the temples, the mid and lower face, I had to fill a little bit more in the temples. Now, you'll probably notice that when I was doing the treatment, I continuously asked her to raise her eyebrows. The reason why I asked her to raise her eyebrows was I was evaluating the action of the facial nerve. Now, as you inject xylocaine and you inject the filler, which contains local anesthetic, soon that will stop. So you won't be able to tell whether you've done anything to the facial nerve after a while, because obviously the motor effects of local anesthetic will take over. But, you know, initially you can sort of, if you're quick enough doing the procedure, you can actually do the procedure before the local anesthetic has had a motor effect on the facial nerve. And if you're still getting a twitch of eyebrow movement, then that's great. If they've had Botox, however, you might not be able to evaluate that depending on how much Botox they've had. Just tell them if it doesn't come back ever again, then you've had free permanent Botox. But that's one way of looking at it. Okay.